Hello pre-AP biology students. This is the video lecture that accompanies chapter 2 and specifically talks about macromolecules, which are life's building blocks. When we talk about macromolecules, it has everything to do with a branch of chemistry called organic chemistry, which is the study of compounds that contain bonds that have to deal with carbon. When we refer to macromolecules, we are talking about something that is very large. We've discussed some Greek and Latin roots, and the word macro means large, so we are dealing with large molecules. And there are four main groups of macromolecules: carbohydrates, which are your sugars; proteins; lipids, which are your fats, oils, and waxes; and finally nucleic acids, which deals with DNA and RNA. A macromolecule is made by taking a smaller molecule, which is called a monomer, in this case each one of these individual things, and combining them together. When you combine monomers together, you get polymers. The root word mono means one, and the root word poly means many, so we have many links together. So a macromolecule is essentially a polymer, which is the same thing as a biomolecule. And this is what that would look like when we discuss the chemistry behind it. Now, each one of these joints, the corners, is a carbon bond. So this is a carbon bonded together. When monomers join together, the process defined chemically is called dehydration synthesis. So D means to remove. Hydration has to do with the water, so we're removing hydrogen bonds or water, parts of the water molecules. The polymers that are formed can then be broken down later into their component parts, so back into their monomers, and that process is called hydrolysis. So joining these guys together results in the dehydration synthesis, and breaking them apart into their individual monomers is hydrolysis. In depth with our macromolecules. The first macromolecule is a carbohydrate, and carbohydrates are composed of the elements carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. They are what is termed as a monomer, which is a monosaccharide, which is a simple sugar. Mono again means one, so saccharide is sugar. We have one sugar. You can, just like the monomers, join monosaccharides together into complex carbohydrates, which are called polysaccharides. And here are two of our carbohydrates. We have cellulose and glucose. Now, when the carbohydrates are formed, the elements are formed in a ratio of 1 to 2 to 1. So you have 1 carbon for every 2 hydrogen for every 1 oxygen. So a carbohydrate in this case with 6 carbons has the formula C6H12O2. And then if it had 5 carbons, it would be C5H10O5. There are several functions of a carbohydrate. Glucose, which is a main carbohydrate that we use as humans, is the main energy source used by the body. In animals, this is stored as glycogen, and humans are animals. Plants, on the other hand, store sugar as a starch. Plants use cellulose to strengthen their cell walls. So as you can see, cellulose on the left differs from glucose on the right. One we would use in plants and one is used in animals. These are the second form of macromolecule that we will talk about. And proteins are formed from the elements of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen, just like carbohydrates. However, we add in nitrogen as well. They are a monomer termed amino acid. Amino acids join to make long chains, which then fold into the 3D structures called proteins. So this is an example here of an amino acid, and it forms this primary structure here, which then can form the secondary structure, and you can continue to build these up, and these are all forms of proteins. The function of a protein is to form bone and muscle. They help fight diseases because they are antibodies. They have enzymes that control the rate of reactions in the body, so how fast you process things. And they also serve as hemoglobin, which carries oxygen in the blood. So some examples of foods that contain protein are your meats, your fish, eggs, and milk. There are other things that contain proteins as well, but these are the most common forms. Macromolecule is lipids. Lipids contain mostly carbon and hydrogen, but they also contain oxygen. And there are three main categories of lipids: fats, oils, and waxes. The most common quality of a lipid is that they are not soluble in water. This is because water is polar and most lipids are non-polar. In other words, they don't dissolve or mix in water. Many types of lipids are formed when smaller molecules, such as glycerol here or a fatty acid tail, combine together with compounds called triglycerides. When we talk about lipids, it is important for us to determine whether it is a saturated or unsaturated form. Saturated simply means that every single bond has a hydrogen attached to it, and it is full of hydrogen. Unsaturated, on the other hand, not every bond, so this one right here, for example, is attached to a hydrogen. Carbon is double bonded to itself instead of having a hydrogen here and a hydrogen here. When we look at the chemical structure of lipids, it is very easy to see the difference between lipids and carbohydrates. Lipids form these long chains, whereas carbohydrates form a carbon circle, essentially. The primary function of a lipid is to store energy. They're used to store energy. They are important because of biological membranes and waterproof coverings. They allow water to not enter. Lipids also form steroids, which serve as chemical messengers in the body. Our final form of macromolecules are the nucleic acids. Nucleic acids, as you can see, are made up of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, and the new one is phosphorus. They are polymers made of monomers, which are called nucleotides. As you can see, the nucleotide is on the right, and it forms, in this case, DNA on the left. There are 4 nitrogen bases that are found in nucleotides, and those 4 are adenine, guanine, cytosine, and thymine, which is only found in DNA. So again, the 2 kinds of nucleic acids are DNA and RNA, and they are made of monomers, which are called nucleotides. Nucleic acids serve the function of storing and transmitting genetic or hereditary information. RNA stands for ribonucleic acid, and DNA stands for deoxyribonucleic acid. So that has given you an overview of macromolecules, which is the section of Chapter 2 discussing life's building blocks.